Friday. I figured what I would do is I was gonna bring us a little bit of good news, all about the Chinese death virus. Um, and for the record, I was calling it that long before anyone else really knew it existed. So, it's. Anyways, that's beside the point. Okay, all right. So, what I wanted to do is I wanted to share an article with you guys that I found today on a website called It's either Worldometers or Worldometers. I like either, so it's fine. And basically, what this is it's just talking about the death rates. Um, in related to COVID. And don't worry, this is going to be good news. But you know what? I want to try and make this video short. I'm kind of hungry and haven't eaten yet, so we're just going to get right into it. Okay. So here we go. So this is Worldometer, whatever. I have used them for my data on COVID. Not that I needed a ton, but and I found them to be fairly reliable, and I've been able to pull the data off the site and mess around with it myself just to sort of get my own understanding of what's going on. But yeah, once again, let's just get into it. Friends, whatever. There we go. Okay, so coronavirus COVID-19 mortality rate. Now this was only updated on May 14th, so some of these numbers may have changed. I think that it's gotten less deadly. I want to say, but either way, we'll just read this. So, introduction: when calculating the mortality rate of a virus, disease, whatever, we need one, the number of actual cases. We need to know the number of actual cases, not merely the reported ones, which are typically only a small portion of the actual ones that have already had an outcome, positive or negative, recovery or death, not the current cases that still have to resolve. The case sample shall contain zero active cases and include only closed cases. Okay, so why is that? Okay, that makes a ton of sense, and the reasoning for that is, and they might get into that, but I'll try to skip over it if we get there. Is that you only want active case, or you don't want any active cases, because those people may still die or live. Therefore, that's not a true data point when you're trying to figure out how many people have died of COVID, right? Um, and when they talk about the actual cases being very few, they'll get into some more details on that in a bit. But basically, what they're saying is that there are many more people who have had COVID and either didn't know it or didn't have severe enough symptoms and never got tested and never got that check mark saying they had COVID and they recovered. Therefore, the recovery rates are going to be higher than we would expect, or rather higher than the data would tell us. Hot certificate. Okay. Two, the number of actual deaths related to the closed cases examined above. I'm going to get into some interesting facts on that one, but we'll get there when we get there, because there's some things that we need to keep in mind about the death rates coming out of the U.S. Okay, but we'll get there, and this will be my own conjecture. It's not a part of the actual facts or the data. Okay, so you can treat that as you will. That's fair. Considering that a large number of cases are asymptomatic or present with very mild symptoms, and that testing has not been performed on the and that testing has not been performed on the entire population, only a fraction of the SARS-CoV-2, I'm assuming that's coronavirus, infected population is detected, confirmed through a laboratory test, and officially reported as a COVID-19 case. The number of actual cases is therefore estimated to be at several multiples above the number of reported cases. The number of deaths also tends to be underestimated, as some patients are not hospitalized and not tested. Okay, so if we base our calculations, death divided by cases, on the number of reported cases rather than on the actual ones, we will greatly overestimate the fatality rate. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory. But I'm just going to get rid of the cursor so you guys don't see it. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but basically what it's saying is that, let's say only half of cases, and they're going to have a much smaller number than that, but only half cases are reported, and then you take deaths divided by confirmed cases, you're going to have double the mortality rate. Okay, and it's significantly different than that. So we'll keep going. So fatality rate based on New York City actual cases and deaths. So it's interesting that they use New York City, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later because I want to go through the article as it is and then give commentary on it after. So here we go. Worldometer has analyzed the data provided by New York City, the New York State Antibody Study, and the excess death analyst by the CDC. Combining these three sources together, we can derive the most accurate estimate to date on the mortality rate of COVID-19, as well as the mortality rate by age group and underlying condition. These findings can be valid for New York City and not necessarily for other places, keep that in mind, but they represent the best estimates to date given the co-occurrence of these three studies. So these three studies were done at the same time, meaning that this is going to give us our best data set. Even if it is just one area, it's still going to give us a really good data set because you're not taking from different times and trying to mush them together because that wouldn't be very good. So this is very accurate for New York. For the rest, you have to extrapolate. You have to consider other variables, right? So we're not going to have exact data for it, but we can use this as a framework and then try to, work from where, what we see happening in New York. So actual cases, 1.7 million, 10 times the number of confirmed cases. So New York State conducted an antibody test study showing that 12.3% of the population in the state had COVID-19 antibodies as of May 1st, 2020. The survey developed a baseline infection rate by testing 15,103 people at grocery stores and community centers across the state over the preceding 2 weeks. The study provides a breakdown by county, race, and age, among other variables. 19.9% of the population of New York had COVID-19 antibodies. So, with a population of 8 million, blah, 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 people in New York, this percentage, with a population of 8 million, over 8 million in New York City, this percentage would indicate that 1.67 million people had been infected with SARS-CoV-2 and had recovered as of May 1st in New York City. The number of confirmed cases reported as of May 1st by New York City was 166,000, more than 10 times less. So that's our multiplier. So note how I said earlier too, it's actually a multiplier of 10. So the number of people, the number of reported cases is likely going to be, I hit the wrong. The number of reported cases, that's not supposed to be there. Get over here. Okay, the number of reported cases is actually 10 times less than what we should assume are the number of cases that have happened. So I think that's very interesting, right? So that's not a scary thing though, right? Because we're gonna see what that means in a minute here, but I'll let us get to it in here. Okay, so as of May 1st, New York City, so actual deaths 23,000, almost twice the number of confirmed deaths. So they are increasing the number of COVID deaths. And again, we're going to get into that and why that's interesting for New York, but we're going to go through it first. As of May 1st, New York City reported 13,156 confirmed deaths and 5,126 probable deaths. Deaths with COVID. Deaths with COVID-19 on the death certificate, but not laboratory tests performed. That's really important. That's really important. For a total of 18,282 deaths. The CDC on May 11 released its preliminary estimate of excess mortality during the COVID-19 outbreak. New York City, March 11th, to May 2nd, 2020, in which it calculated an estimate of actual COVID-19 deaths in New York City by analyzing the excess deaths, defined as the number of deaths above expected seasonal averages. Sorry, I lost myself there. More deaths to be... found that in addition to the confirmed and probable deaths reported by the city, there were an estimated 5,293 more deaths to be attributed. After adjusting for the previous day, May 1st, we get 5,148 additional deaths, for a total of actual deaths of 13,156 confirmed, 5,126 probable, 5,148 additional excess deaths calculated by CDC, equaling 23,430 actual COVID-19 deaths as of May 2020 in New York City. So you can kind of already see where this is going. The actual cases got a multiplier of 10 times, whereas the actual deaths got a multiplier of 2. A difference of order of magnitudes here, but we'll continue. Probably not literally magnitude. Either way. Infection fatality rate 23,000 divided by 1.7 million equals 1.4%. Actual cases with an outcome as of May 1st, estimated actual recovered 1,671,351 plus estimated actual deaths 23,430 equals 1,694,781. So the infection fatality rate, IFR, is deaths divided by cases. So I'm not ordering pizza again. No. So deaths of 23,430 divided by cases of 1,694,781 equals 1.4%. So 1.4% of people infected with COVID-19 have a fatal outcome, while 98.6% recover. So by comparison, right, if we're to pull up, and I'll just pull it up on my screen here, death rate of the flu, because you're like 1.4 isn't a lot, but like you said, oh, it's people dying. I mean, that's pretty bad, right? Let's see here. U.S. flu season preliminary burden estimates. No, I want to straighten up. Death of flu. Death rate of flu. It would probably help if I. Oh no, yeah, and interesting. Telling me I can't compare them for some reason, which is neat. Is okay. I'm not getting the answer. I've working off memory, and this could be wrong. I have heard that the influenza has a death rate of, and this is going to be a huge jump of either. It's either like half or 1%, right? But I know that there are a lot of diseases that we live with day to day. I shouldn't say diseases, viruses, things like that we live with day to day, that have death rates around 1. So that's not crazy. This is 1.4. It's higher. It's, but we're gonna get to that. I don't have an Excel spreadsheet for this one. I'm reading an article. Deal with it. So that's the infection fatality rate. The mortality rate. All right. Get the cat. Be quiet. And probability of dying. As of May 1st, 23,430 people are estimated to have died out of a total population of 8,398,748 in New York City. This corresponds to a 0.28% crude mortality rate to death. That's the CMR. That's going to come up a few times here. Or 279 deaths per 100,000 population, or 1 death every 358 people. Which, I mean, again, any death's bad, but people die every day, right? So, as we start to bring these numbers down by bringing in more data, I think this is something where we can see, things aren't that bad, But we'll keep going, because I think where it gets most interesting is when we hit mortality rate by age. Hey, this guy here. Okay. When analyzing the breakdown of deaths by age and condition, we can observe how, out of 15,230 confirmed deaths in New York City up to May 12, only 690, 4.5% of deaths, occurred in patients under the age of 65 who did not have an underlying medical condition, for which it is unknown whether they had or did not have an underlying. Okay, so Underlying illnesses include diabetes, lung disease, cancer, immunodeficiency, heart disease, hypertension, asthma, kidney disease, GI liver disease, and obesity. That's one a lot. So we'll do this next one, and then we'll pause for a second. So under 65% years old, 0.09% crude mortality rate today. So 85.9% of the population, so just over 7 million out of the 8.3 million in New York City, is under 65 years old, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, which indicates that percent of person, 6.5%, or 6.65 years old and over in New York City as being 14.1%. Get the cat, shut up. Come here. Oh, you wiener. Oh, you wiener. Wiener. Look at the camera. Look at the camera. Hanging out? He's just hanging out? Okay. So, but we can calculate for the entire population under 65 years old, both healthy and unhealthy. Flu has a death rate of 0.002% in 2017. 1 in 3 COVID is huge. The flu kills 35,000 to 40,000 to 40,000 a year in the US. COVID is killing that each month. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I think it's worth noting that coronavirus is novel, so that would be a lot of the reason that's happening. But I mean, it's still happening, right? So that's fair though. That's good to know. I was misinformed on that one, so that's good to hear. Well, actually, it's bad to hear, but you know, I'm a fair man, I think. Anyways, we're gonna keep going with this. Just to sort of really drill down to it, okay? Because I think this age thing, and then I'm going to bring up why it's important that this study was done in New York, because I'm going to bring up why that is, because there's some stuff going on there you might not be aware of. Okay, so anyways, so we can calculate the entire population under 65 years old, both healthy and unhealthy, because they didn't know who was unhealthy. So this is going to include those with underlying conditions. And that's what they were talking about, who did not have an underlying medical condition. They didn't split that up for the under 65. With 6,188 deaths, 26% of the total deaths in all age groups occurring in this age group, of which 5,498 deaths, 89%, in patients with known underlying conditions. The crude mortality rate to date will correspond to 6,188 divided by the 7.2 million, which equals a 0.09 crude mortality rate. Yeah, you beat me to the punchline, Taylor. You beat me to the punchline on that one. But there's other things too. So yeah, crude mortality rate to date, blah blah blah. So far, there has been one death in every 1,166 people under 65 years old. So compared to 1 in every 358. So it's significantly lower. It's especially in New York, because of what Taylor pointed out was, and they actually did this in New Jersey too. So if you pull up this website, Worldometer, and look at their COVID things, you see the death rates in just the raw death rates. If you take cases divided by, or deaths divided by cases, which as this shows, you're supposed to multiply that number by 10 based on their statistics and their studies, or rather the studies that they're referencing. If you just take that, it looks like they have a death rate of 10%, which would be 1%. But still, based on what Taylor's saying, and he's a very well-informed gentleman, and I trust him on that. Jet the cat! I'm gonna put you in a bin. Don't give me that. Don't, you got your kibbles. Did you not get any more kibbles? Doesn't matter how much you meow. Doing a video. Anyways, but yes, so even compared to, oh shoot, where was I? Thanks, Jet the cat. Yeah, so they have, yeah, 10%, so 1% if we're doing this math for them, which isn't perfect because we're supposed to double the numbers, but we're also including active cases and in and around. Okay, so that puts us at about a 1%. But again, that's because they sent people with COVID specifically, and not old people with COVID. When I first heard about this, I thought it was they were if you were in a care home and went to the hospital for COVID, you would have to go back to COVID. No, they were sending young, healthy people, otherwise healthy people, to care homes, and we're talking like this is going to sound bad, but uncontrollable homeless people, people with mental illnesses, people with, issues that would make them unable to be controlled, so that they were, and this is probably not all of them, but it was some of them. I've read stories that they were, people with COVID just running around. I'm sure it was an incident. I'm sure they didn't just let them run around, but you get my meaning, okay? It wasn't well thought out, and it was both New Jersey and New York that did this. So that's partially what explains the huge number of deaths in older people. There was a point that they're not reporting the number of deaths out of care homes anymore. They stopped reporting those numbers separately. So that probably tells you a lot. But getting off topic, or on topic, but onto different topic. Anyways, so far there has been one death in every 1,166 people under 65. So that's significantly different. In 89% of the times, the person who died had one or more underlying medical condition. Okay? We are gathering and analyzing additional data in order to provide more estimates by age group. Okay? So, herd immunity and final crude mortality. So, crude mortality rate is not really applicable during an ongoing epidemic. Okay? So, that number can only go up because that's how that number works. That's basically the number of people who have died from it in total based on the number that there are. Okay, at least as I, Oh, hey, my stupid gain filter is working too well. My voice jumps around way too much. Jet the cat is having a good poop right now. I'll lower my open threshold. There we go, that's probably better. Okay. And to reach herd immunity for COVID-19 and effectively end the epidemic, approximately 2/3, 67% of the population, would need to be infected. Now, that statement, it drives me mad. And the reason is because we are trying so hard to make sure nobody gets it. We're locking everything down so that nobody gets it. And it's like, oh, by the way, the solution is people get it. And it's like, and especially when you look at how small the death rates are amongst young, healthy people. And I say young, I mean 65 and younger. Anyways, moving on. As of May 1st, New York City is at 20% based on the antibody study findings. There's also been a huge exodus out of New York, like people moving out, so that percentage may be higher because a lot of people left the state and their population is actually smaller than they think it is. But I digress. Therefore, the crude mortality rate has the potential to more than triple from our current estimates. The solution is that people get it without overwhelming the medical system, which, Taylor, and I know that's the thing, but no medical system has been overwhelmed. I have not seen a single credible report about a medical system being overwhelmed. In fact, in New York, months ago, they were tearing down the extra hospitals they had built. That boat that got sent there, the hospital boat, was never used. Sure, if getting it once will really solve it since reinfection has been confirmed. What we need is T-cell immunity. Okay, so that I don't know as much about. To be fair, but I feel like as far as the immunity goes, yes, there have been cases of reinfection. Now, as to how serious those are, or if that's the norm, because that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the norm just because it happens. So we know it can happen. Um, but is that, well, like, why is that? Why did that happen? We would need more information around those cases, because as far as I'm aware, that's not how viruses normally work, right? So for us to say, well, this is different, and the reason I say that is not to try and deny that COVID exists or anything like that. It's not some conspiracy theory, but we need to keep in mind that this is a balancing act. The UN came out and basically said 250 million people are going to be on the brink of starving to death due to the economic shutdown. And I'll use the wrong language here, created by COVID, but that's wrong. The economic shutdown was not created by COVID. It was created by our response to COVID, which there's in my thought process on this has always been, we overreacted because we had to, because we didn't know what we were dealing with, because we didn't know what was going on. So we overreacted, which was fine because we needed to, which I understand it's playing with words. Obviously, you're not overreacting if you're reacting in a way that you should based on what you know. But I digress. That's sort of, retroactively we overreacted, but now we're continuing to overreact. We're relying on the scariest data and the scariest way we can interpret that data to determine our day-to-day lives, and we're completely ignoring the results of what we're trying to do to fight it, because it's bad, especially in places like New York and other large city centers that the shutdown has had huge economic issues, or caused economic issues that are affecting people's lives greater than if they got COVID. But I'll get off my soapbox for a minute. Now, okay, so that's pretty much the article there, right? But the other thing you have to keep in mind, now, this is something why, if you're looking at U.S. numbers, you have to take them with a grain of salt, because the U.S. government, I think it was the federal government, from my understanding, made a huge error early on, and they promised extra funding to hospitals for every case of COVID they had and for every COVID death. So this has been reported in the New York Times, in many reputable news sources. There was a motorcycle accident. Guy died in a motorcycle accident. On the death certificate, COVID. That's reported as a COVID death. Now, understandably, if he did have COVID, no evidence that people who have recovered from COVID-19 are protected from a second infection. If we open up all the restrictions now, there's a good chance that we'll see the medical system being overwhelmed. So I hate to, because I'm not going to go into any more articles in this video, but my initial looking at that, first of all, it's under the commentary section of the World Health Organization, and the World Health Organization was also holding up the fire for the Chinese for a while. Like, they were. Like, that, it's not even, like, that's not a conspiracy theory. That's not a conspiracy theory. That is a known fact that they were basically, whatever China said, they would say, even though it flew in the face of the facts. So I'm reluctant to believe the reports from the World Health Organization. Never mind something that seems to, again, I'm not going to pull it up at the moment, and it's probably bad form for me to make this kind of commentary without pulling it up. That's fair. I will read it once I'm done the video, but that's my initial reaction to it. And if somebody, no one should take my word for it. I don't know much. I'm reading articles and I'm medium informed on a lot of these things. Am I more informed than your average Joe? Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I'm like 4% informed instead of 2% informed. Yay me. But that's my initial reaction to that, and I will check that out. But again, as I was saying, in in New York, the man dies of motorcycle death marked down as COVID death. Now, there's two ways that I could see this playing out, and the first one is, well, they just wanted the extra money, so it's COVID death, right? But there is something called comorbidities, which basically means that when somebody dies, they have comorbidities, so things that they had when they died. Um, now, I'm gonna get the statistic wrong, Taylor. You can correct me if you'd like, but I think it was something like 90. I'll say 92. I think it's 96, but I'm gonna say 92 because if I go low, then you can't hit me with it. But or maybe it was 86%. It was high. It was high. Percent of COVID deaths had comorbidities. So there's two ways you can look at that. If you want to be scared, you can say, well, that just means that all of these people died from COVID, but they also had something else. And if you want to be angry, then you can say, well, all of these people had something else, and that plus COVID is what killed them, so COVID isn't that scary. The answer is probably somewhere in the middle. Okay, so this idea that there's some sort of incentive to decide to report a COVID death for extra money is really, really, really skewed. Okay. What's happening is the hospital is receiving a package of funding to deliver care. If they have a patient who costs more to treat, too bad. If they have a patient who they treat more efficiently, good for them. This helps keep insurance payouts down. I haven't heard about the motorcycle incident, but I'll look it up. Yeah. Also anecdotally, one of my coworkers has kids who live in the States. They live in Florida. Sorry, Arizona. My bad. They live in Arizona. And they, in talking to her, they have told her that they've had friends that have gone to the hospital for something completely unrelated to COVID. And then when their insurance comes back, it notes that they were treated for COVID. Which, I mean, it goes a little against what I'm saying right now because that would say increased numbers, which would decrease which would increase the mortality rate. But then again, if boxes are getting checked off saying that people have died of COVID, I'm just gonna break my own rule here and look up the motorcycle death COVID. I'm not on your screen right now. I'm on to Staricus. That's interesting because I know a man killed following motorcycle was fatal motorcycle crash listed among. Okay, I'm not gonna Snopes. You know what? Let's pull up Snopes. I have my issues with Snopes, but let's see. So they're gonna say about this rating outdated. Okay, killed and crashed in Florida 2020 was listed as COVID-19 death. In July 2020, Snopes readers began inquiring about the news reporting that a person killed in a motorcycle crash had been listed as a COVID-19 death in Florida. Florida was among the states experiencing a surge in COVID-19. During a press conference, I pointed to the case of a motorcyclist, blah, blah, blah. Contrary to what he states, Center for Disease Control and Prevention guidance doesn't direct caregivers to list all deaths as COVID-19 deaths simply because the disease was detected in the deceased. Instead, it instructs caregivers to list various contributing factors to death in appropriate sections of death certificates. In other words, it does not state that anyone who suffers an unnatural death, such as traffic accident, should be listed as a COVID-19 caused death if they happen to test positive, even if the disease didn't cause their death. It does appear to the case, however, that the motorcyclist who was killed in a traffic accident also tested positive for COVID-19. It was initially listed among Florida's COVID-19 related deaths, but officials from the Florida Department of Health said that the person has since been removed from the count. When were they removed from the count? The story about the motorcyclist was initially reported by Waffle. I don't know who that is. Oh, an Atlanta-based TV news station, which learned the information in a phone conversation with Orange County Health Officer Dr. Raul Pino in the July 17 article. Reported person died in a motorcycle. The first one didn't have any. He died in a motorcycle accident. Update the story 2 days later, thinking that the motorcycle's death had been removed. Okay, so this is why I don't like Snopes as much as I used to. Sorry, I can't. We're debunking daily, because this can kind of be how Snopes works. Oh, recomorbidity. If I have diabetes and I'm hospitalized for COVID and while receiving treatment, the doctors lose control of my blood sugar and I die. The cause of death wasn't the blood sugar that I had control over until I got hospitalized. It was the reason why I was in the hospital in the first place. COVID. Okay, yeah. In insurance, there's such a thing as concurrent causation, which essentially states that if a loss is attributed to two causes, and they can't determine which of the causes was the main cause, then it's all deemed insurable. For instance, during the flood, if your sewer backs up and you have a sewer backup insurance, you can't say these 6 inches of damage are related to the flood and these 3 inches to the sewer backup, so everything is deemed insurable. So if you're in the hospital for a couple of things and one of them is COVID, which we're still learning about, then we can't necessarily say what is from COVID. I mean, I get that. Although I will say, and again, the story was anecdotally, but that's what you're addressing, so I'll address what you're saying. They didn't have COVID. They didn't get tested for COVID. They didn't, like, their visit to the hospital had nothing to do with COVID. There was no, they weren't getting tested for it. They weren't at risk for it. It wasn't involved. And the insurance came back and said they were treated for COVID. So that doesn't really, like, and I understand what you're saying, for sure, as far as the insurance thing is, and that's true. I don't think it actually addresses what I was saying for that reason. But anyways, the Snopes article there, the problem is that listen, the COVID count at all. Yeah. And again, like, what is I don't want to get over the edge of a conspiracy theory, right? Okay, what I'm looking at is there's not some cabal bringing this all together. They're trying to control the world and use COVID and get all those Billy 8 chips in us with the vaccine. But I think what we can do is we can look at each one of these situations and see how people acting in their own interests, and sometimes acting in a way that they feel is in everybody else's best interests, will perpetuate something that just sort of catches up with itself. It's pushing it forward even though it doesn't need to be. It's talking about it more than it should. They're trying to make us more afraid of it. And then because we're more afraid of it, people say, well, I'm going to say the scarier thing, because then people will... I love that argument of, well, we don't want stupid people going out and doing stupid things, so we're going to make it sound scarier than it needs to be. But the problem is if you keep doing that, it keeps sounding scarier. But just to address this Snopes article, outdated. Okay, well... The problem with saying that it's outdated is basically saying it doesn't matter, you need to throw it away. But they caught it, they talked about it, and then after they got caught, 2 days later, they removed him from the list. So he was on the list. And then when somebody said, hey, he's on the list, he shouldn't be, they're like, oh, we'll take him off. So to say that that's outdated is disingenuous, because it did happen. It's true. It's confirmed. That happened. But Snopes... being Snopes, says outdated. Oh, well, that's old news. Well, it's not. So that's what Snopes does, is they add extra information. So I wanted to know, let's pull it up again here. Okay. A motorcyclist killed in a crash in Florida in 2020 was listed as a COVID death. That is true. That happened. That's true. It's not outdated. It's true. Now, you could say mostly true, but it is true. So this kind of gets into how the media sensationalizing absolutely everything, which they do. Yeah, no, and that's certainly true. That's something they do because they need, and I mean, it's worse now because now people are looking for rage clicks. They're absolutely looking for rage clicks. They want that angry click. you know, because they well, you know, and it's funny too because one of the things that the gentleman that I follow, where I get a lot of my information from, and I find it to be an incredibly reliable source, is Tim Pool. He's a journalist with integrity, if those exist. They do. It's but I watch a lot of his videos on YouTube. He does a lot of analysis and breakdown and research and things like that. Um, and where was I going with this? Tim Pool. Yep. Oh yeah, he talks about his time sort of working for other places in journalism, you know, his sort of his early career, and one of the things he talks about is that um, what they found was that first of all, um, the most the best way to get your articles clicks and to get ad revenue and all this is to get shares. They need people to share things. Likes, comments, shares. That's the big one. Shares. And what they found was they found that the big sharers were middle-aged women. There's a particular age group that they talk about, but it's middle-aged women. So the headlines are designed to get the attention of and get a rise out of middle-aged women. Um, Karens, but maybe even not Karens, maybe just, you know, otherwise reasonable people. So it's designed to rile them up because you need to get them riled up because they share. They're the ones who share things. So you need to get them riled up enough with something that they feel it's important that they need to share it because they're more likely to do that than any other demographic. So all of these headlines are actually directed at middle-aged women to get them riled up and to get them to share something because people need to know about this. So that should explain, I think in part a lot of what we see as far as you know, the misleading headlines and things like that. The other thing too is whenever you're reading an article or something, read. You don't have to read the whole thing, but read the last paragraph because what they found in doing research and scanning how people read articles, most people, the further down you get into an article, the less likely someone's going to read it. So as you go further down and further down and further down, so most people, oh, outdated, means it didn't happen, you know. And then some people, oh, the government fights. Okay, Snopes, Florida was among states experiencing a surge during a press conference. Another thing I've asked the Department to look into, there was a case where Central Florida, how is it possible you get hit by a car? Also, you want them to go back. I think though the reason that case is because what said is anybody that tests positive if they die, that's a death. So you keep going down. Okay, so right away contrary. Okay, so that's not. So they're saying okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It does appear to the case. It does appear to the case, however, that a motorcyclist who was killed in traffic accidentally. So Health said that the person's been removed from the count. So they were removed from the count. So there's nothing really to worry about. And it's not until you get to the last paragraph that you get. They updated their story 2 days later. So you have to read the last paragraph to get the real context that it was initially reported on July 17th and then it was removed 2 days later. So that's when you get the story that it was found out, they got caught, and then they removed it, which is a completely different narrative than, oh yeah, it was there, but then it was removed and it's fine, which is the emotional, the framing and the emotional sort of transference from the beginning of this, right? So it's not until you get to that last paragraph, which nobody reads statistically, nobody reads the last paragraph. And, you know, we end up with just people not reading this part, not understanding that. I mean, and again, no giant conspiracy here. You know, I'm not trying to sell you on that, but I am trying to say you look at Snopes dismissing it, and the actual story is they got caught and then removed it because they got caught. But what Snopes wants to say at the beginning and how they try to frame it is that it's not a big deal. This is the frame right here. The frame is outdated. About this rating. What does outdated mean? This rating applies to items for which subsequent events have rendered their original truth rating irrelevant. e.g., a condition that was the subject of protest has been rectified, or the passage of a controversial law has since been repealed. That rating doesn't even make sense to me. Like something either happened or it didn't. But this is the framing right here. Is, oh, it's outdated. Doesn't matter. Don't look into it. Here's a quick thing. It's fine. But again, that's not the whole thing they're saying, and you can read the rest of this and get more solid information. But it's framed. So, and we are at minute 45. I was only wanting to do about 20 minutes. That's how that went. Thanks, Taylor. No, but Taylor, thanks for jumping on and chatting with me there, and that was some good stuff. And I've got some stuff to look up just to understand a little bit better. And I enjoy having someone balance me because I have my views, I have my biases. I come on ready to rage at something, and getting a better picture of the where was that here? The flu death rate significantly lower than I thought it was, which is good to know. So that's that's good to know. Is the COVID death rating significantly higher? It seems so. Even though it's lower than a lot of people were fear mongering about. But, anyways, moving on. I am super hungry. I'm going to go make myself some food. I hope you guys have had a wonderful day and you have an excellent weekend, excellent long weekend. Do something fun. Have a beer, or if you don't drink beer, do something less amazing, but still amazing. So with that, I'll call it, and yeah.